Here. Now, we've talked about revising our bylaws. Traditionally, as Mr. Kennedy reminded us, we have excused absent members. If anyone would like to do that, we could. I'm agnostic.
Kennedy, so moved to excuse Mr. Tyne.
Second.
Hanning will second.
Is there any discussion of the motion to excuse Mr. Hine? Hearing none, let's just do voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll call that unanimous. Thank you. Approval of the agenda. I had no comments. What about the rest of you?
I'm fine.
Kennedy, I move adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Mr. Platt. Any discussion? The additions, corrections? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Laura?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. And if anybody feels that we need a division where we call out individual votes, please say so. But if they're unanimous, it moves along a little more quickly this way. All right. Has everyone had a chance to approve the minutes? And if so, what comments, corrections, additions? I had one small comment that there was we left Commissioner Kennedy kind of hanging. Where was that? The phrase simply said, Commissioner Kennedy. Where was that?
Oh, I see it.
Okay. Were you going to say something and didn't, or?
I don't know. But I can look at it.
Okay. Well, or we could just delete it.
Yeah.
What says Commissioner Kennedy? You got something you remember wanting to say there?
No, I think the motion covered that. I think you could just drop that line. I would move to accept the minutes with deletion of that line where it just names me on whatever page that is.
I think that's a coherent motion. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Hanning will second.
Okay. Is there this further discussion of the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting them as amended, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Disclosures. I have nothing to disclose. Mr. Kennedy?
None.
Ms. Hanning?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Platt?
Nothing.
Aye. That was a nothing?
Nothing.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Then we will move on to the public applications portion of the meeting. First one is the facts and conditional use permit application CU 0422. Mr. Gertsch, would you like to explain that one to us?
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying something new. I tried to share the screen, so hopefully you'll see it. You can see a map property up there. That's the one that's kind of reddish or orangish. That's the property that we're talking about. The applicant actually owns a property across the right of way there to that little sliver to the west. So this application was submitted by Andy and Angela Faxon. They're actually here in the audience with us today. The location is 1000 Welsh Lane. They're requesting a residential, what they're requesting is a conditional use for a small event space on their residential property, which they also have a home on. The surrounding properties are residential or vacant land. We sent this out to review to a number of folks. We received a few responses, but there were no comments or they had no objections. That was the basics of their comments. So the findings necessary for approval for this application, they are required to publish notice, and which they have. The notification requirements have been met. They're also required to make the following findings, that they provided a site plan and survey as required, that the proposed conditional use shall not harm the public health, safety, and welfare of the community, and that adequate public services are available for the proposed conditional use without creating an undue financial burden on the county. They're also required to address a number of impacts, which those impacts were addressed by the applicant in their application and are also here in the staff report for review. So the proposed use is a small event space. What they're looking to do is using some of their outbuildings that are connected to their primary residence to do small workshops and other weddings and things, small parties within those buildings. And so this use is not found in the current land use table. And so the direction given in the regulations is the planning director needs to determine what is required, if it's an allowed use, conditional use, or prohibited use based on similar and compatible uses in the land use table. So I reviewed that and I've determined this use to be similar and compatible to church or religious facilities or a clubhouse or social or fraternal halls. Both of these uses require conditional use if they're located in a rural residential zone. These uses require parking. The buildings are typically not used daily, and they often accommodate similar events that is being proposed by the applicant. This is consistent with the current proposal. The applicant has provided a complete application and has addressed the potential impacts this use may cause. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval, applicant responses, and staff analysis referenced in this report are adopted as findings reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specific impacts, and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff is recommending approval of the facts and conditional use application, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report. If there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those. As I said, the applicants are in the room as well, and they're here to answer any questions that you may have as well.
Questions of staff by the commissioners? Ms. Annie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question I have is, do you know the current configuration of septic tank leach fields at this property and how they are configured to the two 1,800 square foot buildings that already exist? And secondly, I'm wondering what the drinking water source is.
Okay, so I believe there's a septic system on the property, and to get water on this property, we have to be a well. I'll let the applicant address these a little bit better. They're proposing some portable toilets on the property for any events that they have there. So I don't believe that they'll be using the septic system for that, but you can even ask the applicant to clarify that.
Thanks. I'll save my questions for the applicants then. Thanks a lot.
Questions for staff, Mr. Kennedy?
None, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Platt?
I don't have any, thank you.
I had a concern similar to Commissioner Hanning's. What we're approving is the conditional use is the event center, but that approval doesn't come with the with a lot of direction. And so I was interested when they said that they were going to provide portable toilets. Is it appropriate, Mr. Planning Director, to make that a condition of a conditional use? Can we do that, or how do we lock that concept into this project going forward?
Mr. Chair, I mean, one way to do that would be to include that under, you could add that to the staff report under like the water section, or not water, but wastewater. I can't remember let me see what the section is. I'm looking at their application. What they say in their application is they, to not impact our own septic system, they will provide 3 stalls. One of the stalls will be ADA compliant. So, I mean, you could also hold them to what's in their application, that this is conditioned upon, following what they've already said they're going to do in the application. But water quality is where, if you would like to add something like that, or in the staff analysis, we can, I guess in your analysis, we could add something too. I don't know.
But is it correct that does the whole application automatically come forward? I guess maybe that's my legal question. Just because they said it in their application, do all of their representations become tacit conditions of the permit?
Right, yes, they would be, so.
So we don't need to make it an explicit condition.
Correct, yeah.
That was the only specific concern that I had. Other comments from commissioners? Then let's let the applicant address Ms. Hanning's concern. Have you lost me?
Just where I need to be.
Yeah, just down there. I don't know what we were seeing.
Ready or?
Yeah, go ahead. So we do have a septic system out there. It's to the east of the buildings. We are not planning to use that for these events. We are going to use luxury porta potties. Basically, it's a trailer with 3 stalls in it, one of which is ADA accessible. It has heat and air conditioning both in the stalls. It'll be on a trailer, so when it's full, we can either get the service to come and pump it out, or we can pull the trailer to a disposal site and dump it. As far as the drinking water, we have a well there. The water quality is very good. We've had it tested. Any other questions? I don't know what else you want to know about.
Yeah,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Faxon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can follow up with the applicant on my questions. Thanks, Mr. Faxon, for explaining the septic. Are the 2 1,800 square foot buildings, do they have existing bathrooms in them that are tied to your existing septic system?
No, they do not.
Okay, although the luxury bathrooms sound interesting, I was trying to picture a bride with the full getup using one of these bathrooms, and didn't know if you had existing bathrooms in the facility for like the guest of honor kind of situation. And if you did, then it was going to beg the question of, well, how do you keep other people from using that bathroom, just because preferentially people tend to prefer to use indoor bathrooms over porta potties. But I may not fully appreciate how luxury these are. So that was one of my questions, is how do you prevent people from using existing bathrooms? But it sounds like they don't exist, so that's not a problem. And then I guess my question about the drinking water source, I just wasn't sure. I cannot recall the regulations that kick a drinking water source when it's used by, more people. Does it fall into this category of a transient drinking water well that requires you to periodically test and to make sure that your patrons are getting safe water? So I'm just curious if any of this use would kick your well into that category. And you may not know the answer. But I'm wondering if the county knows the answer to that. Thank you.
It does not kick us into that necessarily. We do test the water on a regular basis. That was my former job, was a water treatment operator at the city water plant. So I've had some experience with testing the water.
Maybe Mr. Gertz knows, just for our information, what is the threshold for a transient non-community public water supply?
Mr. Chair, I don't know. The only time we've ever even looked into that is when we've done, we're doing some work with our mobile home park regulations. And it's usually based on the number of units that are connected to it, where this is just kind of an event space. I'm not sure. I don't know what the numbers are with that at all. I mean, that's something we could look up, but it's really not a realm that we're in because we don't really deal with water. That's the state engineer's office that does that.
Yeah, it's actually an EPA regulation that DEQ kind of rides herd on, and I agree. It's not necessarily up to us. Yeah, not us. So perhaps Mr. Faxon should be aware that he may cross that threshold, and it is a number of people served over a certain period of time. A remote gas station, for example, does qualify as a transient non-community water supply and has to be registered with EPA and DEQ and then tested on a much reduced basis compared to what you're used to, Mr. Faxon, for the city. But there are those requirements. So I guess we resolve the comment by simply, please be aware of that. I don't see that it affects our decision unless one of my comrades disagrees.
If it falls into that, I have no problem with doing the testing. So I'm a licensed operator still. So
other questions for the applicant?
Sure. Are we allowed to ask from the audience? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, are we through with the commissioners? I guess hearing none, then let's take public comment, and then just to advise the public, if you do want to address this application, please come to the podium, state your name, your address, and we'd like to confine your remarks to 3 minutes if possible. So we certainly welcome public participation if there is any at this point. So public, going once.
Sure. Hello, yeah, my name is Steve Kozlowski. I'm a nearby landowner on 1170 Welsh Lane. So, I actually didn't come for your thing, but since it's come up and I live nearby, my main question is, what's the size of these events and frequency? Size in terms of how many people are expecting, and then how often do you suspect you'll be having events there?
Please, can I just answer you this way?
Yeah,
or is that?
yeah. Go ahead.
Microphones in the ceiling, they can hear you
Okay.
from wherever you're at.
Okay, under 100 people, and it won't be every weekend. Weddings, graduation parties, family reunions, workshops, retreats. So it's not like it's like massive weddings or anything like that. It's a smaller space. And so we want to keep it under 100 people.
And are you anticipating monthly, multiple times a month, just out of curiosity?
Well, I guess we really don't know. I would say it's more than monthly, but I would guess several times a month. And I wouldn't say it's every day, it'd be more probably weekends than anything. And
Okay, thank you.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. But let's run that past planning director. When we approve a conditional use, what are the tacit, if not explicit, constraints on that? Based on what we approve going forward, could they put in 500 people every afternoon?
Let me see what they have in their application. They submitted.
I don't remember them speaking to that numerically, but
It may not have been in here.
I think it was based more on parking spaces.
Yeah.
40.
So they are doing a 40 spot parking lot. But yeah, I don't think it says how many folks are in there. I mean, that's something that you probably could limit through a condition within the conditional use permit to, limit the impacts on traffic and those types of things. I wouldn't have a good estimate of what to recommend there with this, but I mean, I think definitely if it's not going to be a small event space, if it becomes more than that, then they wouldn't be in compliance with their conditional use permit. But we've had conditional use permits in the past where we've put a limitation on the times of business, heights of buildings. We've done these things in the past. So if there was some kind of limitation, that's something you could definitely recommend to the Board of County Commissioners.
Commissioner Hanning, you had a comment?
Oh, sorry. I was just chiming in about noticing the 40 space parking, which seemed to, I guess you could have 4 people per car potentially, or more, depending upon the carpooling. But I guess looking at limits could be a useful thing for the neighborhood. I want to say I'm supportive of this business idea, and I appreciate that Mr. Gertz was able to find a similar category to put it under, like a church. But I could see the neighbors growing tired of too many cars coming and going throughout a weekend.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please.
I mean, if they're doing indoor events, there's going to be a natural limitation on the space that they have to put people to. So, which I'm not sure how many people can be held in their buildings, but.
Mr. Chair, that reminds me of a question I forgot to write down, which was exactly along those lines. Does anybody know what the fire department would rate the maximum capacity of the buildings at?
So the fire department, the city of Laramie Fire Department wouldn't have any say in this. But where this is commercial, they may need to be talking with the state fire marshal's office. I don't know if you guys have or not, but there may be some limitations that way, depending on how they see it. But yeah, we don't typically have. I'm not sure what the state does when it comes to fire and those things. I know they may look at fire suppression systems and those types of things, but I'm not as familiar with what the state fire marshal's office would require. That I can't really address that very well.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Kennedy, please.
This is Kennedy. The fire marshal would typically set an occupancy based on square footage. You'll see those in retail locations. So I would anticipate they would have one. I don't know what it might be, but they normally would be setting some sort of an occupancy limit themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to be trying to craft conditions on the fly. If this is of concern, Mr. Platt, have you got any comments on this?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Hirsch if there are anything, facilities like this in the county that we've dealt with before. This is kind of a first time thing.
This is for this small type of event, center or deal. I don't think I've ever dealt with something like this. Not in a rural residential area, at least. I mean, these types of things do happen in commercial areas quite frequently, but and honestly, a lot of the event spaces that we're looking at, I mean, you'll see out in the county, there's people that have barns and those types of things that they use for events like that. But this particular case, I've never dealt with.
Mr. Chairman, my general comment is reading their application and the comments that have been made and staff analysis. I personally don't see any problem with what they're proposing. If down the road this should become a problem, maybe there's some sort of nuisance clauses that neighbors could bring to bear on this. But I look upon this favorably as it stands.
So, Mr. Gertz, what is the recourse if things were to become, well, they realize their dreams of everybody wanting to go out there every night? You're suggesting that the fact that the application uses the word small would give this body some recourse to say that's not what we approve. What's your sense of the potential need for a limitation?
Well, so I mean, yeah, I mean, we've got the application to go on. So if it's clearly going above and beyond what they were asking to do out there, I mean, if they had thousands of people on the property, which, I mean, that would be obviously, well, you shouldn't be doing that. If there are nuisances that go on the property, I mean, that would be something that we could enforce through our nuisance regulations. Which we don't have really noise standards per se or anything, which, could be something. I don't know. It's hard to say if there's a good, if we need to add something more or we don't. I mean, obviously if it goes way beyond what the scope of the application is, that'd be something we could do. But if we're like splitting hairs, like, well, they've got 250 people on the property and we were only expecting 200 to be on there, that's where we can't really do much about it. So.
Other questions for the applicant or the director? Hearing none, what's the pleasure? It sounds like we could either table this and try to fashion some sort of limits on it, or move it forward as written. I certainly have no objections to the project. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we recommend approval of the facts and conditional use application CU 0422 to the Board of County Commissioners, incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions of law as listed in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Further discussion. Ms. Hanning?
I'm comfortable with approving it the way it is, and I know that planning staff will do a good job of writing up our concerns for county commissioners to see if they want to address any specific conditions, and maybe by the time this goes in front of the county commissioners, that additional information about what fire marshal occupancy could make its way into the application for the county commissioners to consider, so that we don't hold up wedding season.
I'm sympathetic to the motion, but if the applicant is willing and there were some obvious constraints that they would be willing to put on it that might be appropriate to bring those forward as it goes to the county commission, just to allay that concern. So further discussion of the motion on the floor, which is to approve as per staff recommendation. Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
How do you vote? Ms. Hanning?
Aye.
Platt?
Aye.
Votes aye, it's unanimous. Thank you for the contribution to the wedding season. We hope it all works out well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application before us is a Fortman zoning change application LUC 0222. A request for zoning change from ag to rural residential for basically a lot split. Who's presenting this one? Mr.
I don't know if that's me. This is Mike Fortman in on Zoom.
Oh, okay. I'm looking for a staff presentation of your application, and then we'll get to you in a moment.
All right, the applicant is Michael and Ruth Fortman, located at 1168 Welsh Lane. The request is to change zoning from agricultural to rural residential. Current use is residential. One dwelling unit currently exists. Access is off of Welsh Lane. There were 4 reviews that we got back, and nobody had any concerns. The applicable sections of the Albany County zoning resolutions is Chapter 3, Section 5, and Chapter 5, Section 5. Findings necessary for approval. Pursuant to Albany County zoning resolution, Chapter 3, Section 5F, the Board of County Commissioners must make the following findings. The applicant has provided the required site plans and/or survey. The proposed zoning change generally follows the suggestions of the Albany County Comprehensive Plan, including but not limited to the long-range growth plan and the priority growth areas. The Albany County Attorney's Office has a comment on that. The applicant has adequately addressed all potential impacts, as well as pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 5 of the Albany County zoning resolution. The applicant has provided the required notice by posted sign publication and certified mailing. Staff analysis, the applicant has addressed the potential impacts the zoning change may cause and has provided a complete application. This property is currently zoned agricultural, and a change to rural residential should not have any effects on surrounding properties. The applicant wants to subdivide their property into 2 approximately 5-acre lots. I will also throw on that currently the lot is not zoned correctly. It is too small to be an ag lot. And so I'll throw that on there. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval and applicant responses referenced in this report are adopted as findings reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specified impacts and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff recommends approval of the Fortman zoning change application, LUC 0222, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Mr. Kennedy?
None, thank you.
Ms. Hanning? Yes,
Sorry,
Ms.
Mr.
Hanning.
Chair. Thank you. I wasn't sure if you said my name. The computer or my iPad glitched for a moment. I guess I just I didn't see in the application an explicit discussion about water and wastewater. So I assume this will be on septic tank, leach field, and a private drinking water well, and just wanted to verify that since I didn't see it addressed in the application.
Yeah, that would be more addressed in the subdivision application, but as far as I'm aware, that is the case.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Mr. Platt, comments, questions for staff? And I see we've been joined by by Mr. Thine. Welcome. Have you got any questions for staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry I'm late.
Good. Do you have any questions of staff on the Fortman zoning change?
I do not.
I had just a couple of things. What was the comment, Joe? You mentioned that the county attorney had a comment. Is that the one that's in the staff report regarding comprehensive plans?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question on the comp plan. I understand that council has advised us quite strongly not to make our decisions contingent on that, but I do think that our decision should be as well informed as possible with respect to the context in which we operate. So be assured I'm not going to make this a condition of approval or denial, but where is this with respect to the comp plan? Is this close enough to town to have been embraced as a priority growth area 3, for example?
It is in priority growth area 1.
Which means?
It is of the highest priority, the section that is closest to the city.
Thank you. And then your comment, Mr. Williams, about the lot size. I'm not sure the relevance of that. We have non-compliant lot sizes throughout the county, and it's been my understanding that is irrelevant. Where are you going with that thought?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I think we just wanted to note that it's currently a non-conforming lot. There's nothing wrong with the lot as it currently is zoned, but it is a non-conforming lot, meaning it doesn't meet the lot size for the standard. The minimum lot size for agricultural zone is 35 acres, and this is only a little over 10 acres. I think that's all we wanted to note. So just for your.
Okay,
but
there's no implication of a policy that nothing can be zoned ag that is less than 35 acres. Is that correct?
Correct. So, I mean, if it was a new parcel or a property that we wanted to change from residential to ag, if it didn't meet the lot size, then we'd probably say, well, that's not appropriate. But going, there's lots of parcels out there that are smaller than the 35 acres that are zoned ag at this point. So,
thank you for that clarification. Do the commissioners, any commissioner, have another question, comment for staff before we move on to the applicant? And sing out, because of my screen might not show you all. Seeing no indication of that.
Chairman, let's make a comment. I did actually ask Joe about the same sort of thing you got at, about this being in a priority growth area. And he indicated to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the staff had coordinated with the city planner and the city didn't have any objection to this.
We did not. We do not send them applications unless they are subdivisions. And because that's what they would like to do, if it gets approved and they go forward with a subdivision, then it would be sent to them then.
Then I misunderstood. I thought that you had indicated there'd been at least informal communications.
Oh, I mean, they know what we're working on.
Yeah, that's
it's not nothing formal. We didn't send them the application.
Yeah, I understand that, but in the informal communications, there were any objections to this.
Yeah,
that's what I was getting at.
Not that we heard, no.
And this may become part of the growth area management plan, on which we'll hear a report later on our agenda. Okay, let's hear from Mr. Fortman. If you would like to add a thought, or if anyone wanted to stand for questioning, at least that. Do you have something you want to bring to our attention?
No, not particularly. Just wanting to downsize our home a little bit and get something that's a little more energy efficient for us to retire in. So.
Are there questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Fortman? Seeing no indication. Jeff, go ahead.
In reading the application, I follow what you're trying to do. And I guess there was a question. Splitting this parcel into 2 parcels, does that second parcel that you're planning to sell, somebody brought up subdivision? So I was a little confused because I thought that was just going to probably become, a single resident parcel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that your intention?
Yes. Yep.
So to follow up on that quickly, the two lots will be what size once the split is finished?
One will be the lot where the house is that we live in now will be 5 acres, and the one we're going to build on will be 5.1.
So the rural residential zoning would not allow an additional subdivision. Good question, Mr. Thine. But I think, is that right, Mr. Gertz?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So we have not created an envelope of development possibilities. I have nothing else. Others? Is there any member of the public present who would like to comment on the Fortman zoning change application?
There is.
Please.
Hello, Steve Kozlowski, 1170 Welsh Lane. I'm Mike's neighbor. Hey, Mike, wherever you're. Hey, so I just wanted to, just one thing I wanted to maybe bring up and discuss and ask Mike a little about it. What I want to ensure, if I even can ensure it, is that the new development does remain essentially a single family resident. In the parcels immediately, so I'm immediately adjacent to Mike. And there's some other parcels on the north and the west of my property, where they built barn dominiums, and they appear to be apartments. I think it was claimed it might be a house at first. Now it's an apartment and a large apartment with a working shop. And so there's some concerns that I've been having. And there's actually 2 shops been built, and I'm sure it's all been through this, it's come through this process. So, I don't, listen, Mike has been very upstanding neighbor, very good neighbor, easy to work with, very cooperative. So I don't think there's going to be an issue in terms of, do you, Mike, have any intention of renting those out as apartments?
No.
And because, or is that just going to be?
Yeah.
No.
Excuse me. Let's let Mr. Gertz address that. When we approve a rural residential subdivision, that comes with constraints. Am I correct, Mr. Gertz, that no, there is no possibility of additional residences on these 2 lots? Is that correct?
Yeah, so on rural residential zoned land, if it's only 5 acres, you'd be allowed 1 dwelling. Whatever that looks like, it'd be 1 dwelling. So whether it's a single family house or it could be a barn dominium with an apartment in it with, or the home part and the barn in the back or whatever they have. But it's 1 dwelling is what the standard is.
So regardless of Mr. Fortman's intentions, we are only authorizing at this point single residences on each of the 2 lots. Do you have further?
Again, to clarify that, the reason I ask is there's another example, the other ones I was referring to, that appears to have 4 apartments in them. They're very large apartments. It seems like it can house up to 16 people. And so that's why I'm asking the question. I don't know if those are unauthorized uses. And so that's not Mike's case. It sounds like, Mike, this is a barn dominium for you and your shop. Is that correct? Or are you planning on leasing out apartments within that 1 dwelling?
No, Steve, I plan on selling the house I'm in now and the shop to 1 person to dwell in it. And I'm going to build my new house there. And that's where I plan on retiring in. And it'll just be 1 house, 1 level, 2,000 square feet, and then the shop added on to it.
All right, thank you. So for the record, I absolutely believe Mike. And again, he's been a great neighbor. and very trustworthy. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. And if you have issues with adjoining properties that need to be brought to the attention of the county's compliance staff, certainly you're welcome to do that. As far as this application that's in front of us, are there other public comments? And thank you, Mr. Koslowski.
Thank you.
Hearing and seeing none, what's the pleasure of the commission?
I'd just like to make a comment to our guest here,
Oh,
which is
please.
all the land in your area is either zoned agricultural, rural, residential. So if there are people with apartments on their properties, that looks like illegal. Maybe Mr. Gersh could address that, but
And he's can do
Yeah,
that.
and I don't want to make an issue of that now. I understand. If an issue was to develop, how would I actually come to this board? How would I get it? How would I discuss it in an official meeting?
Gertz, if you'd like to address that, I'd like to confine us to the matter at hand, but Mr. Gertz, if you can help out here briefly.
I think for us to understand for ourselves, but also as well. So
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, so on it, the process would be if there is a complaint of a neighbor, you think that something's going on that's not within the county rules. We have a nuisance form you can fill out. It's online. You just drop it by our office or just come talk with us. And then we can investigate that and then possibly do, take some type of action if necessary. If you don't want to do that, there's always a public comment period with at the end of this meeting, as well as the Board of County Commissioners have a public comment period at the beginning of their meeting. So either way, you could just show up at a meeting if you want to express your concerns as well, but you can also come to us and then we'll start that official investigation process. So thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. May we have a motion of how to address the Fortman zoning change application?
I make a motion that we vote on the application.
Have you got the agenda in front of you?
I do.
Why don't you read off our legal folks have been after us for saying all the right words and getting our dominies in the right place. So
sorry.
Go for it.
You're quite correct. They did provide us with a script.
Or in the minutes, they've done a nice job of articulating the potential motions.
Yeah, allow me to scan ahead to that. We're behind, I should say.
I think you'll find that in the packet most usefully.
It's in the, I don't think it was in the packet, actually. Am I right about that, Mr. Gersh? That it was a separate?
it's in the packet.
Chairman, it's always in both.
it should be.
Okay, I have the script here. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh boy. Approval agenda, yeah, we're past that. Applications. I believe this is, I recommended, maybe Mr. Gersh will help me here because
I just read it and then you see if you read it.
You may, please.
Okay. So the staff recommendation is to approve the Fortman zoning change application, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in this staff report. So you can move it as I just read it if you'd like.
I so move.
The record will be clear what was moved. Is there a second for Mr. Tynes' motion?
Kennedy, second.
Thank you. Further discussion of that motion? I'm seeing no indication of that. Mr. Kennedy, what's your pleasure?
Aye.
Danning?
Aye.
Mr. Platt?
Aye.
Mr. Tyne?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. Next up, Peterson zoning exchange application, LUC 0322. This is another lot split requiring a zoning change from agricultural to rural residential. Who will be presenting that? By way of
That's
staff.
I again. So the applicant is Matt and Heidi Peterson. They're located in tract 1 of Harney Creek Ranch. The request is to change zoning from agricultural to rural residential. Current use is vacant and access will be up Stevenson Road. We did receive some reviews. Albany County Assessor's Office, County Assessor had no concerns. Senior GIS Analyst Karen Bowman had no concerns for the zoning change, but had a question about the potential lot split. Rob Fisher had no concerns. Martin Curry of the Laramie Rivers Conservation District had no concerns, and YDOT Taylor McCourt had no concerns for the zoning change, but did have comments for future development. Full comments can be seen in the review section. The applicable sections of the Albany County zoning resolution is Chapter 3, Section 5, and Chapter 5, Section 5. Findings necessary for approval. The applicant has provided the required site plans and/or survey. The proposed zoning change generally follows the suggestions of the Albany County Comprehensive Plan, including but not limited to the long-range growth plan and the priority growth areas. The Albany County Attorney's Office had a comment on that. And the applicant has adequately addressed all potential impacts, as well as pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 5 of the Albany County zoning resolution. Yeah, the applicant has provided the required notice by posted sign, publication, and certified mailing. Staff analysis, the applicant has addressed the potential impacts the zoning change may cause and has provided a complete application. The property is currently zoned agricultural, and change to rural residential should not have any effects on surrounding properties. The applicant wants to subdivide their property into 2 lots, which will require approval of a subdivision application. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval and applicant responses referenced in this report are adopted as findings, reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specified impacts and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff recommendation is to approve the Peterson zoning change application, LUC 0322, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Mr. Kennedy?
None, thank you.
Ms. Hanning?
Chair, yeah, I guess I have a couple questions for staff. So YDOT has some significant comments that apply down the road to when the land actually gets, the historic gravel pit area gets reclaimed essentially, and the land surface is made usable for residential use. So do you take it that all those YDOT comments would come into play at the time of that point in development?
I don't foresee any of the YDOT comments coming into play because they're not going to access it from the highway. But if they do, then we will certainly do that when the time is needed.
I took some of the YDOT comments as what could potentially affect drainage into the existing, is that Harney Creek there? So right now the gravel pit is a inward sink for water to go to. Regrading of that property could take surface water and send it into Harney Creek. And I guess I was reading the YDOT comments as like, be careful where future water goes because it could really mess up this intersection of the railroad and the overpass and the where Stevenson Road enters it. So I wondered if you see then the YDOT comments coming into play later that way, or if I'm misreading their comments.
I guess, I mean, no matter what, they'll get the application from them if the subdivision were to go forward. And they can make more comments on that, and that's when we will decide, restrictions and whatnot.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilmus. Another question that kind of follows on to the last zoning change where we discussed how the lots were being already split down to the approvable minimum, and that that she wrote, you're only going to get the one single dwelling. But here we have a case of splitting it really into, I can't remember the acreage, 19 acres, maybe an 18 acres, something like that, which could be further subdivided if the applicant decides down the road to make the lot smaller. I presume we would see that in the preliminary plat or final plat stage. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely.
And so in terms of the reclamation, it's just based on the map that's included that mentions, it looks like it was historically excavated area for gravel, in that plans to be reclaimed. Will the county have oversight of that reclamation as part of a zoning certificate?
No.
Okay.
I'd be
I believe
glad
they're already in the
to
process
clarify
of
some
doing
of that for you if you'd like.
I believe they're already in the process of reclaiming.
Okay.
Yeah, I could clarify that for you if you'd like.
Sure. When we get to the applicant, I'd love to hear from you, Mr. Peterson, about the plan for the surface. But right now I'll keep to the plan of asking staff their questions, and I'm done with mine. Thanks.
Mr. Platt, did you have anything for staff?
I don't.
Mr. Thine?
Ms. Hanning asked my question, so thank you.
And I'm just going through kind of in order of seniority, that by no means is this your only shot. So anybody who has any comments at any point, certainly sing out. I had a couple of thoughts. There was a GIS concern. Maybe I didn't read that sufficient care. What was that about, Mr. Wellens? In the review comments, the boundaries weren't adequately defined. What am I remembering?
Was that Karen Bowman?
I so.
Yeah, I think it was.
Let me find this again. Yeah. It's this has to do with it already being a subdivision and putting FKA on the plat, formerly known as Harney Creek, which we will make sure to get done on the subdivision.
But it's a clerical comment, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Remind us of the acreages. I think Ms. Hanning raises a very important point that we are not at this stage approving a lot split. We are approving a zoning change. So we are approving the potential for 5-acre lots. So give us the numbers if you would, please, Mr. Willis.
19 or 18.9 acres and 16.3 acres.
Is it the feeling of staff that that your feeling of its compatibility with surrounding areas would still pertain were it to exercise the full potential that we are considering granting it, which is 5-acre lots?
We had
Mr. Chairman, so it actually, if you look at the map, and I can pull it up if you'd like to look, there was a previous subdivision application in that area. I think it was Loveridge, is what it was called, Loveridge Acres, which is just to the west. Is that what direction is? The ones closer to the highway.
Yeah,
there's 3 lots there. They're actually commercial lots that were divided.
I don't know, quite a few years ago. There's also the lots that are north of that one, that some of them are in that range as well. So that I would be compatible with some of that.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. When you say that range, you mean the 5?
Yeah, the 5 acre range, maybe a little bit bigger, 7 or 8 or something.
That's the ballpark.
And just to note that, I mean, what is up there already, the Harney Creek Ranch, there are 35 acre lots. I mean, you're still looking at a residential development. However, obviously the density could be increased if they went down to the 5 acre lots, which would include, more septics and more wells in the area. So, it's an already developed area. So, one of the things in the comp plan that we're not supposed to use talks about is just like growth efficiency. In already developed areas are growth efficient because there's a commercial node there because there's commercial properties around there. And there's also lots that are of similar size.
But the possibility of coming back into the 18 with a 3 acre subdivision is real. And we would be basically committed to approving it, barring some other circumstances, if that were the case. Is that correct?
Couldn't go down to 3 acres.
Yeah, 5 acre lot size, yeah. But yes, if they brought in a subdivision plat for a 5 acre lot size, barring any huge issues, then yeah, it probably should be approved.
Okay, just so we're clear on where we are. Thank you. That was my only comment. Other comments from the commissioners before we move to the applicant? Seeing none, would the applicant like to address the commission with any information you want to add to that? Or you want to just stand for questioning?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if I could clarify some of those earlier questions. One of which I think was a question from YDOT with water. It sounded like it was kind of a little bit not accurate as far as where the Harney Creek was. Harney Creek is actually quite a ways to the northeast of this lot, with absolutely no potential of drainage from where it is right now. The reclamation part that we're getting ready to do is really only on about half of the old gravel pit. Half of it, just because it actually is so old, has really kind of reclaimed itself and has good growth on it. And we don't want to disturb any of that. It just takes too long to get anything to seed back on it. Our reclamation plans is to kind of smooth out and clean up the easterly side of the gravel pit and make it look, more like a viable lot. One of the other ones that I was kind of hearing there when you're talking about the being able to split down to 5 acres or below, one of the things that we have in our covenants is, is a one-time split, and we do have a minimum size, in our bylaws.
What is that size?
Pardon?
What is that size?
I believe it's a minimum of 5 acres. You can't go below a 5 acre. I'd have to look it up real quick, but I could get you that information.
That would be consistent with our rural residential zoning, and covenants really don't bear on our decision beyond just context. So thank you for that information. Yep. Are there questions for Mr. Peterson? Going once? Hearing none, thank you for those further explanations. I'm reminded of one that go back to staff. The process going forward with, if it is just a lot split, that comes in as a small subdivision and we see a final or preliminary plat together. Is that correct?
Yes.
If it's part of a subdivision.
And that's the point at which we will see drainage issues and traffic and so forth addressed.
Correct.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners? What's your pleasure on this zoning application?
Public comment, Mr. Chairman. Is there any?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, public comment. All right, skipped across that. I'm looking at my screen and not seeing them, but they should certainly be welcome to come forward at this time. Would anybody like to comment on the Peterson zoning change application?
Yes. Hi, my name is Shane Zumpf. I live at 193 Stevenson Road. That's within the Harney Creek subdivision. I own 2 lots in there. I'm objecting to the rezoning application. Just a few points I'd like to make. First, the current HOA specifically prohibits subdivisions from being created, except in the case of Lot 18 or through the family split provision. Lot 1 has no such exception. Now, the rezoning application does state that several lots have been split in the Harney Creek subdivision. To my knowledge, there have only been 2 lots that were split. One of them being Lot 18, which has an exception to the HOA subdivision rule. And the other lot that was split was done through the family split provision that the HOA does allow. The rezoning application, as I see it, is not applying for the family split exception stated in the HOA rules. I also believe that the application is being disingenuous when it states several lots there that were subdivided. I would also be happy to read Article 3 of the HOA covenants to the board for any further clarification. On the second point, the rezoning application states that there would be no economic impacts seen by splitting this lot or rezoning the lot. I would counter that the Harney Creek lots will see a negative impact here. Exclusivity of the current lots and associated acreage make further development economically harmful to current lot owners in the development. So those are my points that I'd like to, sort of express. On the HOA rules, it also does state that there's a minimum of 10 acres, not 5, for those subdivisions. So even though, the applicant states that it would only be split into 2, having to rezone it such that it could be split down to 5 would be in direct violation of those HOA rules as well. So it just changes the entire dynamic of our subdivision.
Thank you. Could we just, is Matt present?
Yeah.
I don't.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff to follow up on those comments.
As did I. Please go ahead.
Would staff have a copy of the existing plat for this subdivision, and were those covenants incorporated into the plat at the time that the final plat was approved?
So Mr. Chair, this, and Mr. Kennedy, this is not considered a county subdivision per se. This was a record of survey. It was filed back some years ago when the state allowed 35-acre lots to be created via a survey. So it's not necessarily something we approved. We did not approve the Harney Creek Ranch. Now, do we have a copy of the survey? Yes, we do. Do we have a copy of the covenants? Yes, we do. I'm not sure when the covenants were created. My only comment would be on that is we're not really authorized as staff to speak to covenants because, we've already gotten into some trouble for talking about covenants with some lawyers in town. So we just want to keep on those. So.
Well, and that's the reason for my specific question about was it on a final plat for subdivision? So that did answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and my question was similar. I was going to invite Attorney General or County Attorney to weigh in on the issue of covenants, which we have gone round and round at. And for Mr. Zump's benefit, the the company line on that is that covenants are contracts between the individual landowners, which the county is not authorized to enforce. And certainly there are actions that are available to one if they feel that their contract with their neighbors has been compromised. Is that understanding consistent with what staff and council would say?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So the substance of Mr. Zum's comments that are relevant to our decision would be compatibility with the existing lot sizes and impact on public services and so forth.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Zumpf? Comments on his comments? Comments on the subdivision?
Zoning change.
Zoning change. Well, yeah, and then we have the subdivision in the background, but we need to keep reminding ourselves we're doing a zoning change here. Subdivisions come later, but are strongly constrained by the zoning, as are our decisions. Thank you, Mr. Zump. Yes, Mr. Tyne.
So I've been looking back at the application, trying to understand what the logic was for splitting the lot. I mean, if they bought into the subdivision in the first place and they have an HOA and they have rules, is this application attempting to circumvent the rules that were agreed to by the original owner? And I'm not questioning the legal aspects of this, just I'm trying to understand this application better because of Mr. Zump's information, which we didn't have before. And I was just online looking at the properties for sale, and they are, sold as farms or ranches fundamentally, and some of them I don't know how working, if they're working farms or ranches or not, but I'm trying to understand the logic for splitting this off, and I'm cognizant of your point, Mr. Chairman, which is, can that individual then further subdivide and start to put 4 homes, for instance, in this space that was originally intended for 1? And I could see property values being impacted by that.
So can I answer that question for you?
Please, yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
First of all the lot owners in Harney Creek can split their lot one time, has a one-time split.
Mm-hmm.
So to further split, for example, if this went through, those 2 lots would be done. You can turn around and try to split them again into smaller lots. So that kind of answers that one. What was your second question on that was again what?
Well, I just, when I look back at the application, there are no negative impacts to splitting the lot. And that seems to be a issue here. I mean, even splitting the lot, and if you say they can't split it again, and that's an HOA thing, so I'm not quite sure legally whether an HOA's rules, hold up, I guess is what I'd say.
Well, I guess my point on there is that we only can play the hand that's dealt to us, and that is before us is the application to change from agricultural to rural residential zoning. Rural residential zoning allows 5-acre lots. So that's what's in front of this body. Understanding there's lots of other players there that are involved, but that's the thing we're deciding on. And so I think the answer from a Albany County point of view is a clear yes. One could go ahead and split it down to 5-acre lots unless they were stopped by some external constraints.
And
which ends up with 6 potential residences in this space. Yeah,
that's what we are potentially improving, and we should improve it with that thought in mind. Mr. Zumpf, did you want to make another comment?
yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize the fact that that's my main point here, is that this has potential large economic impacts to this subdivision. And it was originally slated as 35-acre lots. So the one split that Mr. Peterson is referring to is not a rezoning split. So it's not rezoning the properties from ag to rural residential.
And maybe Mr. Gertsch, you presented us a finding, a recommended finding that there would be no negative impacts from this subdivision. Would you like to speak to your conclusion, your recommendation?
My recommendation, Joe did this.
Okay, Joe, I'm sorry. Use guys. I mean, our rules require an affirmative finding from us that the impacts on the economics of the situation are acceptable. And staff has recommended that we so find.
Right. Well, at this point, we have one lot and we know that they want to turn it into two. I personally don't see that as a huge issue, considering that this lot is on the very eastern side of this division, which is closest to the highway. So I don't see really any other people being impacted. Now, if they were, if it was on the western end and they were constantly driving by everyone's houses, it might be a different story, but it's not.
Yeah. To that point, sorry to interrupt, commissioners, but to that point, we all drive by that lot every day. That the first stop that you come to from the highway going into the subdivision, and that's the last lot that you drive by going to the highway going to Laramie.
So I'd also like to add on to that one right there. It's an old state original gravel pit right now. It's a big hole in the ground. And I'm actually going to reclimate it and make it look like a nice viable lot for people to come in and see and leave and see.
Are there further comments on this point? We seem to have heard the pros and the cons. And again, we are being asked to find that the impacts are acceptable. And if we cannot so find, we'll need to articulate why. So let's close public comment period. Commissioners, what's your thinking? Ms. Hanning?
Mr. Chair, I guess I have another question for staff. Is it possible just to do a lot split and keep it as agricultural zone? Or now we're getting into the problem of the acreage would be too small for agricultural uses. And so the only way you can do this kind of lot split is by changing the zoning to the next size down being rural residential. We don't have a category in between. But is that correct that you can't just do a lot split and still call it all ag?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a couple comments here. There are commercial properties immediately to the west of this proposed lot split or parcel split. I think two of those are fireworks commercial properties. Might just be one. I'm not positive about that, but I think it's two. This is right by the underpass of the railroad underneath 287. One of the commercial properties has a number of, I'm looking at the map online on page 88 of they're probably shipping containers. It's hard to tell exactly, but anyway, something like shipping containers or semi-truck loads. And then nearly half of this lot or parcel is in fact an old gravel pit. And I'm sympathetic to the owner's argument that this is going to improve the appearance of the area in general. And I believe this is an acceptable recommendation that we approve this.
Thank you. Other comments? Would someone like to make a motion?
Hey, we can't hear you.
I was asking for additional comments, or if someone would like to make a motion. We're now discussing it amongst the commissioners, unless there are other questions of staff. Have I gone mute?
No.
I got lots of buttons here. Everybody's gone mute.
Kennedy here. I move that we recommend approval of the Peterson zoning change application LUC 0322 to the Board of County Commissioners, incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions of law as listed in the staff report. I do have a comment to make after a second.
I'll second that.
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
To the public comment that was made on the lot split, that's not within our purview, especially where it's not in any part of any recorded plat. And so as was mentioned before, those HOAs are not within our purview to decide whether or not something falls within the agreed to parameters. And I guess that almost begs a staff question. If it was a family split, that wouldn't even necessarily have to come to us as long as it was within the proper size, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, any state exemptions are zoning doesn't affect state exemptions. This state exemptions rule, so.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you. The motion on the floor to approve as per staff recommendation, adopting findings of fact as recommended by staff. Other comments on the motion?
Mr. Chair, if I understand Mr. Kennedy and staff's comments correctly, we are not empowered to deal with changes that fall within an HOA. That's basically what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Those are private contracts.
Okay.
So
wanted to clarify that to my mind.
Would Mr. Ayers like to comment on that? I think we're all of an understanding, but we could hear from our attorney. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Under, I guess the land use or the zoning change itself, there's nothing in our regulations where we can even consider covenants for the change. Possibly during the subdivision, there are requirements for merchantable title, but that is a separate issue than what we have before us right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And would remind my colleagues, we do have limited abilities within the subdivision approval process to modulate. Lot size is not one of the items that is within our discretion once we have made a zoning decision. So the die is cast largely at this point. Other comments from the commissioners before we bring the motion to a vote? Seeing none, motion on the floor is to approve as per staff recommendation. Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Ms. Hanning.
Aye.
Mr. Platt.
Aye.
Fine.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Reluctantly.
Good luck sorting out the homeowners association restrictions. Those are always a tangle. Moving to the next item on our agenda, the upward zoning change application, LUC 0422. A suggestion to a request to rezone from small lot residential to commercial. Mr. Williams.
All right, the applicant's Reba Epler, which is owned by 156 Kiowa LLC. The request is to change zoning from small lot residential to commercial. Current use, there's a mobile home and an outbuilding that is being renovated for commercial use. The property is accessed off of Kiowa Street. There were some reviews. Chelsea Matthews, County Assessor, had no concerns. Luke Hawkins, Albany County Fire Department Chairman, had no concerns. Martin Curry of Laramie Rivers Conservation District had no concerns. And YDOT had no concerns. The applicable sections of the Albany County zoning resolution are Chapter 3, Section 5, and Chapter 5, Section 5, findings necessary for approval. The applicant has provided the required site plans and/or survey. The proposed zoning change fully follows the suggestions of the Albany County comprehensive plan, including but not limited to the long-range growth plan and the priority growth areas. And the applicant has adequately addressed all future impacts. And pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 5 of the Albany County zoning resolution, the applicant has provided the required notice by posted sign, publication, and certified mailing. Staff analysis is that the applicant has addressed the potential impacts the zoning change may cause and has provided a complete application. This property is currently zoned small lot residential, and a change to commercial is compatible with the existing land use of surrounding properties. The applicant wants to add a sign to the property, which will require approval of a sign permit within the planning department. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval and applicant responses referenced in this report are adopted as findings reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specified impacts, and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff recommendation is to approve the upward zoning change application LUC 0422, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Questions of staff? Mr. Kennedy?
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may have said my name and I never hear it for some reason.
Okay,
sorry for the pause. I'll assume I'm after Mr. Kennedy and not dilly-dally. I do have a number of questions. Well, I guess I found the gist of the application was all about the sign, but there was no discussion whatsoever about what the proposed commercial activity is. So can you tell me what the plan is for this property owner and their idea of what their commercial enterprise will be?
I believe Reba is online, and so she will be able to answer that when she comes up.
Okay, I'll save that one for the applicant when we hear from them. How did the existing well and septic, I assume this is, I guess I'm not sure, you'll have to tell me, is this private well and individual septic tank leach field, or is this one of those funky areas where the city has extended water without requiring annexation?
Sewer district. Oh, this is part of the South Laramie Water and Sewer District. So
They have water, but they have to have septics out there, but they do have municipal water basically.
Okay, so, and that includes the residential lots across the road from this property, right? That it's all, I see David nodding his head. Okay. So then I guess the septic, does it meet the setback requirements that are required of a commercial lot? Like if this brand new commercial property going in, the definition of commercial seems to have setback requirements written into the definition. And I'm just wanting to verify that those setback conditions are met if this were to become commercial.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Ms. Hennig, the setbacks for wastewater systems are governed by the wastewater regulations and not the zoning regulations. And what they say in our regulations are that the setback for the leach field and the tank are 50 feet from the property line. However, if the lot was created pre a certain day, then it can go down to 10 acres, which this lot was created many years ago. And so 10 feet would be the setback from the property lines. They'd still have to be set back from any well, 100 feet. And if there's any wetlands or whatever, I think that's another 50 or 100 feet. So they still have to meet those setbacks. I don't know where the existing septic is on that property. I haven't looked it up. But where there's not wells in the area, that's not really an issue. And that's usually the hardest thing, is to get that 100 feet from a well. Maybe not the hardest thing, but that's one of the most important things. But yeah, as for the zoning, was there any other standards in there? I mean, I think a well has to be set back 50 feet from a property line per our zoning regulations. The state standard for a well, I think, is only 10 feet. But they're obviously not going to be put in. I mean, they could put a well in, I guess, but they do have water on the property from the South Laramie Water Sewer District.
To follow up on the setback issue, so it sounds like the private wells are sort of off the table for being concerned about impacting nearby private wells. Because I guess I'm still in the dark about what commercial activity is going to be discharging into a septic tank leach field. And I'm wondering what the body of water is that you can see on the aerial photography that seems to run to the west and downhill of the property. I don't know, I just along there by the cavalrymen and whatnot, I've seen a lot of migratory birds land in the water along there. So I'm just sort of wondering about that waterway and whether there's adequate setback for potential commercial discharge into a septic tank.
So, Mr. Chair, Ms. Henning, just did a quick use of a ruler on my GIS. It's approximately 200 feet from the property, the south property line. It's Soldier Creek that runs through there. So I believe that our standards are either 50 feet or 100 feet from a leach field, which it would have to meet that. It would have to be at least, like the septic field would have to be at least 10 feet from the property line. So you're a good 200 feet from that waterway, which should meet any standards. Now, I guess it depends on what kind of, I mean, we're talking about a septic system. I mean, there's different types of effluent or whatever. If it's domestic, residential, for toilet, or, bathing, those types of things, that's one standard. If it gets into the other standard where they're doing some type of commercial based business, that's when it would kick over to the state DEQ. They would then review it, the septic application, and their requirements would kick in and not ours.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate you doing that quick measurement for me. I guess my last question is just around whether there is another way to achieve this outcome, kind of like our first applicant today. We dealt with the commercial use of their home for weddings and gatherings under a conditional use permit. And so I'm just wondering, because rezoning this commercial opens it up to future landowners, having a whole long list of permitted and conditional use approvable use that right now would not be available under small lot residential. And it's already quite an industrialized area, of course. And on the one hand, you may say that makes it appropriate for more of that to happen. But when I look at the neighboring residential area and sort of they're already under the shadow of of a stack and nearby to some really high arsen soil levels at that abandoned facility nearby. You know, I'm concerned about the residential properties getting yet more commercial waste put their way. And so I'm wondering, is there any way to address this through a home business and use conditional use permitting or the variance process to achieve the ends for the property owner, as opposed to having to wholesale change the zoning?
Yeah, so me, Dave, and Matt all spent a pretty good portion of time looking at everything, every option, and this was really the only option that we could do.
I can't wait to hear what the commercial business is. I'm like on the edge of my seat. So I'll stop with my questions now and let other commissioners question before we find out from the applicant. Thanks.
We may end up going back and forth a bit here, but continuing the sequence, Mr. Platt, did you have something specific for staff?
I'd just like to ask staff for them to note. I mean, it looks like this property falls within the priority growth area number 1 of the comp plan. That's correct, or just confirm or deny, or
I think it's
2.
Water and sewer districts are priority growth area 2. Well, I don't know. I take that back.
Well, I'm looking at the map.
Part of it,
It could be.
It's
right here
surrounded.
inside the purple area. It's right there, I think.
It's that little rectangle that is not in
It's
it.
right there.
Okay, yeah, it's right in there. I think it might not be that purple area.
It's the little
Yeah,
rectangle.
right. It's a little rectangle.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what the
Yes.
priority growth area 1 is like.
Yeah.
Bring the rest of us. Bring the rest of us into your conversation, gentlemen. We're out seeing the little purple, so can you give that to
Yeah,
us?
so he's looking at the comprehensive plan. Let me pull it
It's
up.
page
so I can-
28 of the comp plan.
Yes, and
again, I'm just asking as a point of note.
the purple section of that is, am I looking at the right page?
What page is that?
It's on page 28 of the comp plan.
Share screen with us.
Yeah, just a second. Let me find that and I will.
Okay, thank you.
I wish I had
Guess-
GIS.
Based on our
Surrounded by properties in prior growth area 1, so I
Yes.
assumed it was incorporated as well as
It
priority.
is, I think it's 2. Yeah, it's right there. Just that little rectangle right there. It's not-
Right here?
Yeah, that's it.
It's that little white rectangle.
The arrow is right there.
This is it.
So everything colored on that map is in priority growth area 1,
Oh, the purple.
not colored. Well, in the yellow and the red and the green and all that is colored is priority growth area 1.
Okay, well, I just make a comment. It seems to me like if it's inside, I mean, it's completely surrounded by prior growth area 1, therefore it's prior growth area 1 too.
Yeah.
Logically, whether it is or not on this. Anyway, I just want to note that. And likewise, I mean, it looks like it also falls within the area of the city of Laramie's urban growth area. Is that correct?
Priority growth area 1 and the urban growth area are basically the same area.
Okay. And then what is the access to this property? I mean, it's South Key District, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and the application says something about Albany County road and bridge access or.
I'll let Matt take this one.
Okay. That was my only question.
Yeah, yep.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Platt, to answer your question specifically, if you look on, I suppose not the color coded. Yeah, no.
Okay.
But on the Epler zoning change area map that's within the zoning the zoning change application packet. If you go farther to North Sanders and all the way down to Kiowa, a lot of these neighborhoods were not platted subdivisions in, I suppose, the current sense of the law. They were just plats and then the lots were sold, but there weren't the same requirements for dedication of public right-of-ways that there are now. So currently, the county does not have a right-of-way interest in South Kiowa Street, which is where Ms. Epler's property is accessed from, and Road and Bridge performs no maintenance on South Kiowa. Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Hanning, you had the floor. Are you temporarily satisfied? Okay, and Mr. Platt, you had anything else?
No, that was all.
Okay, Mr. Thine.
Yeah, we had a couple letters from people objecting to this zoning of commercial, from zoning change to commercial property. And they raised several points that I was not aware of, which you just addressed. One of the points is this is a private road in a private neighborhood. And so and they're worried about the establishment of a commercial property there and where that goes, both for the current use, which we don't know yet, and then secondly for future, commercial use. And so I'm trying to weigh the fact that at least two other homeowners in the area have objected to this. And I'm with Commissioner Hanning on this. I'm on pins and needles to know what this is, because as they point out, the applicant is not using the Laramie address, yet they want to put up a big sign. And is that going to increase the traffic on a private road? And so I'm all ears for Ms. Epler's explanations of all this.
All right, we will get to that. I had a question very like Ms. Hanning's. The application on its face is for a sign. Now, I think the answer we heard earlier was that one needs to change the zoning from small lot residential to commercial in order to erect a sign. Did I hear that correctly?
Or industrial, Mr. Chair.
Why do I see billboards on agricultural land as I come into Laramie on I-80?
That's good. Go ahead. Those are pre-existing.
Mr. Chair, those are likely pre-existing, and under our current sign regulations, which are to an extent separate and apart from this, in order for it to be an on-premise sign, it has to be a commercial or industrial structure, which gives you kind of your size limitations and setback limitations. Whereas if it's an on-premise sign, it cannot be within off-premise sign. Then it's 500. Then it can't be within 500 feet of a residential structure, which at no point could a sign on this lot meet that setback requirement.
If it were to remain as a small lot residential, it wouldn't. I guess I'm still confused. If all I want to do is put up a sign, I'm zoned small lot residential, I cannot do that.
In this particular instance, you essentially have two options. You have your off-premise sign or your on-premise sign. And based off of the size of the sign that's being proposed, and also just the nature of the lot in relation to surrounding residences, it could not be an off-premise sign. So the only option would be an on-premise sign, which would then require a commercial or industrial structure.
By structure, you mean the structure of the sign? I mean, as I understood the applicant, nothing is going to change on the lot.
Sorry, a building, I suppose. And in order for there to be a commercial or industrial building, it would have to be commercial or industrial zoned first. Then you could get the building classification if it is in fact put to such a use. And then you could get the sign.
If no building is ever constructed, you don't get a sign without a building? That's what I'm missing.
So on-premise sign required, if it's gonna be an on-premise sign, it requires a building. So you can't get a sign without a building. So I mean, if it's like a home business, they can get a sign, but it's like 2x3, which is really small, 6 square feet. Now, the regulation, I believe, for the off-premise signs, which are more of your billboard type signs, is they have to be within a certain distance of or a commercial or industrial area. And that's based on like being within 1,000 feet of this many industrial buildings or this many commercial buildings. So technically, I don't think it would have to be on commercial to do that, but they'd also have to meet all the other setback standards as well. That's where it gets really complicated. There's all these setbacks and all these numbers and buildings, and you have to fit it all together to make it work. And honestly, for what is being proposed here, to put a sign on this property, the only way is to do an on-premise sign and have a building that's a commercial building to do that. And you know, just a little preview. I mean, in our discussions, she does have a building on there that she wants to rehab and make into a commercial building, from what I understand. And Ms. Epler can correct me if I'm wrong. So.
Thank you. Ms. Henning, I see you have your hand up, but perhaps we should hear from Ms. Epler, the mystery guest here. Did you have something that would suggest?
I guess I just want to take this opportunity to follow on again to suggest, might we not address this through a variance to some of these very requirements that are attached to the signage? You know, we've granted variances over road requirements. And so I would feel a whole lot better about trying to address this by granting a variance for having to have an on-site premises sign not be tied to industrial or commercial. And I'm just really wondering if we really exhausted our options on granting a variance here. And then I will stop with my line questioning. I am sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just thinking that we need to hear from Ms. Epler here sooner rather than later. But go ahead, Mr. Gerge, did you want to respond to the? There's no other way.
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Henning, there is a variance process for our zoning regulations, and that is an option to go through. Whether they can meet the requirements or not, I don't know if I can flesh that out here or not, if you want to do that, but that is an option, is to go through the variance process. We did discuss the variance with the applicant, and the applicant chose to go forward with what we already had in process, which was the zoning change. And so all these things have been discussed, and this was the option that was asked of us to take forward at this time. So
Ms. Epler, with the understanding that there's some concern been expressed over whether we need to go to a full-scale commercial zoning for this sign, please share with us your plans.
Hi, my name is Reba Epler. I'm an attorney. I have a law business in Wyoming and New Mexico. And I bought this property in 2018 and have been steadily working to improve it. It was actually used commercially by Tex Newton for concrete, and there was so many forms and so much cleanup as a result of like chunks of concrete and all the forms and all the concrete equipment. So I cleaned all that up, and I just feel that it would be really nice to use my property that's on 287 to have a visible sign. So I talked with David and Joe about this, and we talked a lot about this. I didn't want to zone it commercial. I kept saying, is there any way we can avoid this? But they kept saying, no, we really need to go with the commercial zoning if you want to have a sign larger than I thought it was 2x2, but they said 2x3. But I don't think that's large enough. If to put a sign that's real visible from 287. The sign will just say Land, Water, Energy Law, www.rebeppler.com, you know, something to that effect, maybe a little bit more, but so the commercial use is law, and it hasn't had an impact on the road or the neighboring areas because it's such a light commercial use as it is. And I've used my law profits to invest in this property and to continually improve it. And there's a 3-car garage that I have started to work on. I put windows in, and I'd like to turn that into, turn 2 of the garage stalls into a nice commercial area, and then keep 1 for car parking. Because it's very accessible to people if they wanted to come in. It's my preference to really not meet people out here because it's pretty far out, but I just like the access to 287 for a sign. And I feel that that's a reasonable request. It's not going to impact the neighbors' traffic because my current commercial use, which is law, doesn't have any impact on them. So that concern is addressed in the sense that there won't be an additional commercial activity or traffic, I'm sorry. With respect to why is my business located in Hillsdale, we have a ranch in Hillsdale, and I've always used our Hillsdale ranch address as my mailing address because there's a mailbox here, and it would be totally insecure to get that kind of mail out here. Plus, people have stolen mail and things like that. So I don't think I want to be receiving mail at this address at this time. Yeah, and with respect to the property, when I bought it, it was absolutely atrocious. It was covered in garbage and ties and wood, and I have worked very steadily to clean all that up. It took at least a year to get the property cleaned up, and then the shops were filled to the brim with stuff. So I've really worked at that. There's a trailer house on this that was on a foundation that I had a choice of either burning it down or remodeling it. So we totally gutted out the trailer house. It's on a foundation. That's why I kept it. And in time, I'd like to replace the trailer house. But the way I feel is that my business is what generates cash flow to improve the properties. Right next to my property is the old Fort truck stop, and it's totally falling down, and it's a genuine hazard. And there's many people have complained about it. Like there's people, my neighbor Carrie Fink has written to the county planner saying this thing is a nuisance. So what I did was I built a fence that's like 8 feet tall along my property line, and it totally shields the traffic from seeing that. And that has been a real improvement. Plus, I got a living snow fence out there as well. So when the trees are grown up, it's ponderosas and junipers that really will improve the look. If Fort Sanders Bergner Trucking never does anything with that building, I would love if they did something with that building personally because it's such a fire hazard. But really, the way that when I looked into the zoning, that's what it looks like to me. That you have to have commercial zoning to get a sign that's large enough to see from the road, and that kind of is what it is. I don't plan to sell this property. I really like it, and I want to keep improving it. Yeah, so that's what I want to do with it.
Questions for Ms. Epler? Ms. Hanning?
Thank you, Ms. Epler, for explaining all you've done to reclaim the property and make it more attractive for the area, and what your current and future use is. Are you open to addressing this then through a variance? It sounded like when you started off describing the situation that you wouldn't be averse to looking at the variance process to address this. My concern is just once it's commercial and if you eventually move on, it just opens up the future use of this property to be way more than what you plan to use it for. And there could be a lot of traffic coming down this private road. And so like I've said throughout our discussion, you know, I would feel better about presenting what the residential neighbors currently enjoy on the private road by addressing this somehow through the variance process. And I just want to see if you're open to that.
Well, can I speak to the road issue?
Please.
I'm so sensitive about the road. You know, I know the neighbors are really touchy about speeding, and two of the neighbors do a really good job of grading. And there's so many other roads in this area that are almost impassable to some cars because there isn't that kind of community effort to do road maintenance. So I absolutely do not want more traffic on this road. My intention really would be to acquire more property to the east of me to be able to get 287 access if and when that ever becomes available. But in the meantime, with this particular use, my road use will be no more than it currently is, which is just very minimal. And then with respect to whether I would do a variance, I don't know if that's available. I mean, we really did look at this as to whether you could put up a larger sign. The variance that we looked at, that David and Joe and I looked at, was to go for a variance because, so they thought that the trailer house was going to be the commercial building. And I said, no, it's the shop. So they increased the signage is based on the size of the building, according to Joe and David. So it was going to be pretty small with the trailer house. And I said, no, I really am wanting to improve the shop. And the variance question was more of, I didn't think it was applicable. That's kind of the impression that I got, that is not possible. That was what was kind of conveyed to me, to seek a variance. So I mean, I would have no problem if you imposed conditions on the permit for traffic and road maintenance and things like that. If there was any, I mean, obviously I don't want to be responsible for maintaining the road with the very small amount of traffic that I do, because no, I don't meet anybody out here, but I'm very concerned about the road issue too. I don't want the neighbors to have to bear that. But I would say that there is nothing restricting Fort Sanders holdings from accessing their property from that road either. It just so happens that they use a road they've got off of Fort Sanders to get to their, well, both 287 and Fort Sanders, because their trucking business is mostly south of here. And then what they do is they store, there's junk, but there's also trucks and stuff that they store up here. So, I mean, I guess I'd just like to continue with this application because I've already got money into it and I don't think I'd get that back if, you know what I mean? So I think commercial is reasonable, with law being the commercial activity.
Ms. Hanning, or did you have other?
I guess just to follow up, Ms. Epler, do you understand though that once it's zoned commercial, if you choose to sell the property, let's say your law firm really gets busy and you need to go to bigger digs, do you understand that whoever buys it can use it for a whole host of commercial activities that once we grant approval, we can't, I don't believe we can limit things like traffic. I think once it's commercial and a whole host of approved activities are then permitted, automatically. And then there's a whole host of conditional uses that someone could come forward to have granted to them through this body. So I just want to impress on you that we're trying to think about the future use down the road and want to make sure you understand it. It could go beyond just law firm use. Thank you.
I think that is true. It is my intention to hold on to this property. I'm very sensitive to the neighbors, and that's why I don't want to have increased traffic. I don't really know how to address that, except for I guess you guys could put a condition on it that would restrict or require heavier commercial activity to do road maintenance on that. It's a county owned property. It's not a county maintained road, but I do believe the county owns the strip of land that is the road. I don't think it would be bad necessarily to have some commercial activity out here. There is existing commercial activity, and there's a number of people around me that are using their properties in a commercial way. So I totally understand what you're saying, like how industrial are we going to get? It's my intention to hold the property for a long time and continue to improve it. And then if somebody wanted to use this property in the future as commercial, they certainly would be able to use that improved garage as a meeting place. But again, these uses, I'm not going to construct a huge shop out here right now. I would just basically require whoever used this, if they did use it in the future for commercial use, to, there's good parking out here. It is kind of a commercial and industrial like area as it is. I guess that would be nice if people just came out and saw it, to see what I was talking about. I should have included pictures, but it is very commercial in its nature as it is already.
So I wonder if we might bring Mr. Gertz back in here, if I can jump in on your question, Ms. Hanning. It's my understanding that the answer is no. There are no conditions attached to a zoning change. That's a clean decision. So I'm inviting you to correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gertz, so that once you're zoned commercial, then you're commercial. So besides verifying that, share with us what other bites at this apple does one have? Does one come forward for a zoning certificate? I think most of us are more used to the subdivision process than the commercial process. So if we were to zone this commercial, what constraints could be imposed on some development down the road, if any? Is that a tractable question?
Sure, Mr. Chair. So the answer to your first question, yeah, we can't attach conditions to this permit. We're changing the zone, we're changing the rules on that property, right? So there's no conditions attached. That's not an option. So what could they do on this property? Anything that's on the list of that's allowed for a commercial property, they can do any of those types of things. And then there's the list of conditional use that they can do on there too, which would then require more, process and permitting from us. But yeah, there's the only limitations are those that are imposed upon the commercial zone,
which are very few. As I had the same question as I was getting back through it. There isn't a long list of all the things you can do in a commercial zone. The way I read it, it says you can do business things. And then there's a definition of businesses, anything that makes money. Am I missing something in our zoning regulations? Commercial sounds wide open. Is that correct?
It's pretty wide open. If you look at our land use table as well, that lists the specific uses. But there is a wide variety of things that you can do. What you can't do is things, once it's going to have, stuff coming out the building and fumes and those types of things, then you're limiting it down. Or if they're large operations, that are more industrial, those are the things you're not going to be doing here. But for instance, any type of retail, any type of office, gas stations, You know, small, you know, just retail. I mean, just all your typical things you'll see within the city. You could do like a mechanic shop. You know, those types of things would be allowed basically in a commercial zone.
Thank you. Were there other commissioners that wanted to ask something? Mr. Stein.
Ms. Epler, you mentioned 3 bays in the building and that you were going to keep one for parking and then that the other 2 were going to be for commercial activities. Do you have can you amplify what commercial activities you're planning for those other bays?
Sure. So it was a commercial, it was not a commercial, I'm sorry, it's a 3-car garage that was built in 1981, 2x4 construction, and they're 7-foot tall car garages doors. So just make a 2x4 wall that divides where the 2 would have been, the 2 garage doors, and just make it a nice room with a bathroom and be able to meet people out there. I really think that that would be a nice addition to the area. I mean, I do a good job building it and making it look nice. I'd like to pour concrete in front. I'd like to improve the gutter system because it's pretty bad. I mean, it's just an old shop that needs to be improved, and that's how I would like to go about this. We did trench gas over to it last year and water from the city water. So I'm just kind of steadily working that way, and as I make more money, I just kind of want to finance this myself and just improve it so it's a nice building, because it is real visible from 287 too. So it'd be nice for the county to have improved buildings. And like, as you were going down the list of things, and if there's an office there, I don't think that if this was leased to somebody, that would be a bad use of the property at all. It's very peaceful out here. You can see the mountains. People would probably enjoy that if I chose to lease it out in the future. But right now, my intention is to take my money and keep improving my property. I think that as inflation is getting so high, it's really good to put your money back into your property or your business. So, and I like the idea of being able to use the advantage that I have with 287. I mean, that to me, that was just a natural advantage of the property. So, and the sign I don't think will be, it can't be 10 by 10 because the building itself wouldn't allow that. Do you guys, I was going to ask David or Joe, do you guys know the dimensions of the sign that would be allowed? Like, so we're not talking about a giant billboard either.
Let me look at the site plan real quick and then I'll have your answer.
Okay, other questions for Ms. Epler, right?
Yeah, one of the objections from one of the neighbors was that the sign would be, if it was no more than 10 feet tall, it would not block her view of the mountains to the south. But if it was a 10 by 10 foot sign up on pillars, then it would. And so I was looking for that clarification as well.
Okay.
And I guess we'll get that in a minute when we find out how big the sign can be.
It can't be 10 by 10. I know that.
Mr. Kennedy, we don't have a picture of you. Were you waving your hand? Do you have a comment?
It's 58 square feet.
Oh, then that's 29 by 2.
58 square feet would be the allowed size of the sign.
A sheet of plywood.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So that basically answers the question of if it's not more than 10 feet tall at the top, your neighbor had no objection according to their letter. And so it sounds to me like that's doable. Thank you. Those are the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, I was trying to bring you in.
I didn't have any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, though.
Just for clarification, Ms. Epler, I guess I'm hearing various things. You do want to have a commercial zone, even though that may not be your immediate plan, but it sounds to me like you are not asking for simply a sign, you're asking for commercial zoning to give you a flexibility for the future. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, that would give me flexibility, but the actual intent is to get the signage. I guess the bonus would be that it would be zoned commercial, and I feel that that'd be appropriate because the use is law, so that's a commercial activity as it is. So
But if there were an option simply to give you a sign, would that be of interest before we try to plow that ground any further?
I don't know about that because we'd have to ask David what that would entail. From my understanding, that's not going to be an option, but would I be open to that? No, because I think that to use that shop, to make that shop an improved space for meeting and have a bathroom and a heater would be a really nice commercial improvement. And then people could come out here and meet me. I mean, I certainly don't want to meet people in a remodeled trailer house, but I would not be opposed to meeting people in the shop because it'll be nice.
So I think that's good clarification. So the request before us is commercial zoning with all that entails, if I'm understanding.
With all that entails, but my intention is to simply use this for light commercial, like law or office space rental, or again, that would be something that I'm not even thinking about. I'm really just thinking about improving that building and using it for my own law business. And yeah, it would be an improvement to my business too, because then I would actually have a meeting space, because my law business has been mainly just meeting people at different law offices or other places. So this would actually be a real improvement to my business itself.
Yeah, I'm not objecting to that. Just to clarify, and we don't permit intentions or dreams. We permit zones. So it is kind of a binary decision that's before us. And I'm hearing you just say that you're asking for permit from the Albany County to allow that to be zoned, to zone that commercial, as I say, and all that entails, even though it might take you 30 years to get to that point. So that was the only clarification I was seeking. Other questions for Ms. Epler? Okay, commissioners, sounds like there was some interest in possibly exploring just sign options. If
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
Pardon me, but I believe you needed to call for public comment.
I apologize again. Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Kennedy. Yes, we would certainly invite public comment. We have some in written form. Is there anyone on the call or in attendance that would like to comment on Ms. Epler's request? And again, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Hearing and seeing none. What's the pleasure of the commission? And are there,
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I would move that we recommend approval of the Epler zoning change application LUC 0422, the Board of County Commissioners, incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions of law as listed in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Second from Mr. Fine. The motion on the table is to approve the request, incorporating the findings of fact as articulated in the staff report. Discussion of the motion.
Mr. Chairman, my feeling is that is compatible. That's adjacent to the property on two sides, and it abuts a highway right away. There's that road issue, but that is out of our control as well. And so with that, I would welcome any other comments before we vote.
Ms. Hanning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned about the private road impacts to other potential future commercial uses that could take place if this is zoned commercial. And I would prefer to meet the needs of the applicant by waiving fees for a future application requesting a variance and addressing this as a home business, which allows signs, because it sounds like it would, if I'm correct, you could call this a home business if Ms. Epler is occupying the property as a residential use and conducting business there. It could be considered a home business, which allows signage. And then the variance that would need to be granted would be concerning the size of the sign that's allowed to be visible from 287. I would, although the property is certainly undoubtedly surrounded by heavy commercial and industrial use, I am concerned about the residential lots on the private road, the future impacts to that private road that it sounds like I have a note here that the county does not have a right of way on Kiowa Street. I would prefer to address this if I see Mr. Ayers is stepping up to the podium, but that would be my preference here. Thank you.
Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Hanning, this was after discussing with Mr. Fisher, Rob Fisher with Road and Bridge as the superintendent. He was of the impression that we do not have a dedicated right of way. On the GIS map, the online property map, it says that the right of way is for Country Club Road, and I suppose the acreage and the feet of the right of way itself don't quite add up, but it is in the right part of the section. So without seeing the property records myself, I would like to see those before I can say definitively whether or not the county has a right of way. In either event, it is not maintained by the county. And, one more point, Commissioner Hanning. The home business is defined on page 2-3 of the Albany County zoning resolution. And that is defined as an occupation or activity carried out by the owner or immediate occupant of the property who resides on the premises. By definition, home businesses are clearly incidental or secondary to the use of the structure or property for residential or agricultural purposes. And I am not sure if I heard directly, but it did not sound like this is a primary dwelling or place of residence of Ms. Epler. So I'm not sure if it would be able to fit under the definition of a home business sign.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can change how I would address it then. now that the home business option is off the table, then I guess it could be addressed as an on-premise sign where the variance is granted that it must be from a principal commercial or industrial structure. I don't know if a variance can be worded that way. Maybe I'm reaching too far here without the home business as the basis, but I'm just wondering that, again, if there's a way to address this somehow through a variance. Thank you.
Thank you. In the context of the motion on the floor, it would be an amendment to the motion or defeat the motion and bring another one forward. Just procedurally, Mr. Platt, have you got something to add to this discussion?
It sounds to me from the application as well as the comments that Mrs. Epler made, primary intent right now is to put up a sign. And it would be my desire to see it handled as a variance also. But perhaps legal counsel would say that we can't do that.
I think we have the option of tabling this for further discussion, so don't feel too constrained in that regard, but the motion on the table is to approve it. Mr. Thine, have you got comments on the motion?
I do not.
Okay. Speaking for myself, I'm with Commissioner Kennedy when I look at the map and our interest in consolidating uses of similar site types in similar areas. I am not unsympathetic to simply zoning it commercial and all that entails. So I would support the motion. Now, the options going forward here would be to defeat the motion, and then we will have to proceed with something else. Tabling the motion for further discussion, exploration of variances, for example, would be open to us at that time. So unless there's someone else who would like to address this motion, it might be most productive to put it to a vote. Are there any objections to proceeding in that manner? Seeing none, Mr. Kennedy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Standing.
Nay.
Mr. Platt?
Nay.
Mr. Thine?
Vote aye.
Votes aye, the motion passes. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the Markle zoning change, LUC 0522. They request to change the zoning from agricultural to rural residential on a 20-acre piece on Herrick Lane. Mr. Willems, thank you. Go ahead.
All right. The applicant is Brandon Markle, located at 20 Herrick Lane. The request is to change zoning from agricultural to rural residential. Current use is residential. One dwelling unit currently exists. The property can be accessed off of Herrick Lane. There were some reviews that we received. Chelsea Matthews, County Assessor, had no concerns. Matt Ayers, Deputy Albany County and Prosecuting Attorney, has no comments. Martin Curry of Laramie Rivers Conservation District had no concerns. And Taylor McCourt of YDOT had no concerns. The applicable sections of the Albany County zoning resolution are Chapter 3, Section 5 and Chapter 5, Section 5. Findings necessary for approval. The applicant has provided the required site plans and indoor survey. The proposed zoning change shall generally follow the suggestions of the Albany County Comprehensive Plan, including but not limited to the long-range growth plan and the priority growth areas. The Albany County Attorney's Office has a comment on that. The applicant has adequately addressed the following impacts, and pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 5 of the Albany County zoning resolution, the applicant has provided the required notice by posted sign publication and certified mailing. Staff analysis, the applicant has addressed the potential impacts the zoning change may cause and has provided a complete application. This property is currently zoned agricultural, and a change to rural residential is compatible with the existing land use of surrounding properties. The applicant wants to create a 3-lot subdivision, which will require a subdivision application. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval and applicant responses referenced in this report are adopted as findings, reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specified impacts, and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff recommends approval of the Markle zoning change application, LUC 0522, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Questions for staff? Mr. Kennedy.
None, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple questions. It sounds like the plan would be likely to be hauling water from the city. And does the need to put on the deed that there'd be no potable water associated with the lot, is that something that happens later in the subdivision regulations? And I guess along with that, do people drill deep and do they drill wells out this way? Is that an option for getting potable water out here, or is it really only a haul water only situation?
You'd have to ask the applicant, but I believe water is fairly scarce out there. And that would be addressed at the subdivision level.
I guess my only other question regarding impacts to, natural and environmental resource impacts. We didn't hear back from Game and Fish, and I'm just wondering if we know this to be a wildlife, an important wildlife area or not. It seemed like it came up for a cell phone tower out that way previously on Herrick Lane. Maybe it's not anywhere near to this property, but there was a complete paucity of discussion of wildlife out there, and I just wonder if we know anything about that.
I'm not sure about wildlife. I know the tower you're talking about was way further north, so that could have had something to do with it. But once again, once we get a subdivision application, we will send it to everyone again, and they'll have their chance to comment, and hopefully they do.
Thanks a lot. That's all I have.
Platt?
I don't have any questions.
Fine. Go ahead, Mr. Thine.
Ms. Hanning, I note that they say the groundwater is very deep out there. So I don't know if that prohibits the potential for a well, but they will have to put septic in, which they mentioned. And then my other question was, just to clarify, we're not approving a subdivision at this point. That would have to be a separate issue altogether, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on the staff report, specifically consistent patterns of development. The proposed zoning change results in a logical and orderly development pattern in the area. It will not create undesirable patterns of development, such as leapfrog developments or strip patterns of development. The applicant's response refers to the Andrew Ridge Estates as an adjacent existing residential development. And the staff has recommended that we accept that as a finding of fact that it is consistent. I don't think I can find that that's consistent. When I look at this Andrew Ridge Estates, I think it's a bit disingenuous to refer to that as a residential development as though we are simply adding to existing residential development. The lots in the Andrew Ridge Estates are 36, 35, 35, and 41 acres. The second tier, 63 acres, 35 acres, 35 acres. So my question for staff is, what is your threshold for compatibility with surrounding properties? It looks to me like this is open prairie, not a great deal different than approving a 5-acre lot subdivision out in the middle of Wild Horse Acres. So tell us about where you think the thresholds are for compatibility with the surrounding.
The surrounding properties are residential developments, and this is also a residential development. This is not putting industrial around residential. It's residential next to residential, so that is consistent.
So if we had small lot residential, urban residential, let's make it extreme, in the midst of 35-acre lot residential, that would be considered as consistent land use, if I'm understanding your criteria.
I mean, we do have that. If you look at the paddocks,
Okay, so that would be a yes, that the way one fails
I think you
test
can make
of
it
consistent patterns of development is in your minds is something like industrial on top of ag that's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, the other thing I noticed as I was looking at that is there are some residential zone lands that appear to be undeveloped off to the east and off to the south, but the only thing I could see that looked to be residential development as in terms of development on the ground were these large lots that might as well be ag to the north. Does that sound right?
There's rural residential to the north and directly to the south.
It looked to me like the one to the south was unoccupied. It looked to me like, is that?
I'm not sure about the one to the south. I know the one to the north has residences on them.
That's consistent with what I saw. The bakery is out there, right?
Correct.
And it's on an ag lot? Tell me about that.
Let Dave tell you about that one.
Great bakery, by the way.
What would you like to know about it?
What is its zoning status? It appeared to me to be on an ag zone piece.
It's the one directly north of this property.
It's zoned agricultural. The bakery is actually a home business and it meets the standards of that. That's how they applied for it.
And that's okay in an ag zone?
Yeah. They have home businesses are allowed in ag and in residential zones.
Thank you. Those were the questions I had. Appreciate the clarification. Other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to share with us their thoughts, Mr. Markle?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Good for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things. I tried to take some notes on questions. In regard to the water stuff, there's no water out there. It's like 8,000 feet of Cody Shale, and we have no intention of fooling with that. So when the subdivision application is provided, we'll have to make that note on there. I believe it says there's no potable water. And that's the intent, so they'll have to put in cisterns and just have private wastewater systems. So the bakery to the north is agricultural. They do live there and they're operating that business out of there. I believe there's one other parcel that's kind of north and a little bit west of the bakery parcel. And those guys are using that for residential purpose. And then there's another guy that's just a bit north and east, I think like 3 parcels over. I don't have a map in front of me, but he also lives out there. So the only other one we know of in the area would be Kevin Cox to the west, and he's kind of just using that. I think it's zone residential, but I think he's just using that for like a shop property. So our intent in the future would be just to sell these as rural residential lots. And we actually thought this was zone residential for quite a while because that's how it's listed on GIS. So we actually found this out kind of by happenstance when we started considering the subdivision application. And I believe when we submitted for the building permit or the zoning certificate to build the building we have out there now, we filled that in as residential, not knowing, and that might be how we found out that it was zoned ag.
Questions for Mr. Markle? Go ahead, Mr. Thang.
Question, you said 3 lots, and so would that be 3 additional buildings on the 20 acres? Or would that just be total of 3 buildings on 20 acres?
The total of 3. So I think it ends up being like 3 6.7 acre lots. And the theory is that they would build a house or some kind of a shop building with an apartment, barn dominium kind of thing is what we've built on it currently. Mm-hmm. So it would be a total of 3 single family rural residential properties.
Thank you. That's my question.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your reaction, Mr. Markle, to my concern that this is now a wide open prairie in all directions and that smaller lots would be incompatible?
You know, we've spoke with the adjacent landowners, or at least they all called me when they got the letters about the zoning change. And I mean, my understanding from all of them is that they're, you know, fine with all this stuff. As far as the difference in land use between a 35-acre parcel and a 6-acre parcel being for single family residence, I personally don't think it's that much difference. I think the difference in users is probably somebody that might have horses or something like that. But, you know, it seems like most of the land out there now is really just surplus land for the 35-acre users. I mean, they have their little residence, much like the bakery guy. You know, he actually uses about 2 acres of the property, and you know, the rest is just surplus land. I do know that a couple of the other, at least one of the other people out there, I believe his name is Zach something or another. He's just north and west a little bit, was actually considering doing the same thing we are and doing a small subdivision on that property as well. So, you know, as far as surrounding land uses and whether or not I think it changes the face of the property, I guess I don't really believe that that's the case. I've lived out there my whole life. I live about two miles away from this area, and, you know, with no water out there and, you know, having to haul and the lack of power in the area and stuff, I don't see a whole lot of potential growth in the next, you know, 10 or 20 years anyway, because it's just not economically feasible, really. This is just the best use we could find for the property, and we've had some interest in that. So that's what we decided to do with it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Mr. Markle? Seeing none, thank you for sharing that with us. Interesting project.
Sure.
And I'm going to remember the public this time. Commissioner Kennedy, is there someone on the call or in attendance who would like to register a comment on Mr. Markle's zoning request? I'm sorry, go ahead. I guess I'm hearing tweets in the background. All right, let's close the public comment period. What's the pleasure of the commission? Anyone? Comments, a motion, suggestions, amendments? Go ahead, Ms. Hanning.
I'll take a turn making a motion. I move that we recommend the Board of County Commissioners approve the Markle zoning change application LUC-05-22, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, conclusion of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Kennedy.
Discussion of that motion. Mr. Platt, Mr. Thine. Seeing none, let's bring it to a vote. Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Platt.
Aye.
Thine.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Markle, and good luck with your project.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Concludes our public applications, if I can get this agenda to work for me. Okay, so then we just had a few updates here. Lots has been going on. Lots of work being done in the planning office and between various groups. So, Mr. Kirch, could you give us the rundown on the Natural Resource Management Plan, the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan, and the Growth Area Management Plan? Plan.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So the Natural Resource Plan, the consultant's currently working on moving a bunch of the information that was in the main plan, namely the legal information, into an appendix. The committee that's put together to work on this plan has devised a list of folks that are users of the area, mostly recreation users of Forest Service, BLM, and others. And the consultant's actually reaching out to them. We're having discussions there with them. We've contacted both the BLM and the Forest Service and arranging some meetings with them to discuss the plan. So that's where that's at. Once we're hoping to get these meetings all kind of wrapped up here in the next week or so. And then they're gonna hopefully tie everything back into the plan and bring it back to the steering committee to discuss again. So that's kind of where the natural resource plan is.
So that will come back to, pardon the interruption, but just to finish up on the natural resource plan, that will come back to the steering committee and then go back to county commission. Is that the program?
Yes, there'll be some public meetings before it goes back to the commission. I think the steering, trying to think of the timeline, I believe that the steering committee will look it over, review it, and then it'll go out to public comment. And so we'll have a public comment period. We'll have meetings in various areas to grab that public comment, and then it'll go back. The consultant will compile that together. I believe the steering committee will meet again, and then it'll go to the board.
Questions on the resource management plan from the commissioners? Okay, Casper Aquifer.
So this one, this has been mostly with the consultants, where this is a little more technical of a plan. They've been gathering information from a variety of different sources, data points, etc. They've looked at well logs and things along the western boundary of the Casper Aquifer, and so they're doing a little bit of they'll be fiddling with the line there to determine where it meets best within that 75 feet Satanka threshold. So that's kind of what they've been doing. Actually, I think I have a meeting with them tomorrow, and so I'll know more after that. But here in the next month or so, we should start be getting some drafts, and I'm not sure exactly when all the public comment stuff will kick in, but I think they're getting to the point where they're getting things compiled, and we'll start seeing some progress and seeing what they're actually working on, what they're doing. So far, we're just kind of seeing bits and pieces of what they've been doing, but they've been working diligently. I think a lot of it's just getting their mind around all this information and then pulling it together into something that's workable and that we can understand, I guess. Any questions on that one?
Done. Proceed.
Ms. Annie has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. But
I'm just curious, is the consultant also looking at the whatever came of the geophysical survey that was flown for the purpose of trying to define the western boundary? Is that data usable in this effort? Thanks.
Absolutely. That's some of the information that they're reviewing. So that was complete. They flew it the first year and gave us a preliminary report, and then did some modeling and gave us a report after that. And so that was completed, and that is information that we provided to the consultant to review and use if needed in this plan. And it'll probably be an appendix or something somehow. I'm not sure how they're going to tie that in, but it's information they're reviewing.
Thanks. That's all I had. Thank you.
We'll move on to the growth area management plan. So I think since we last met, we kind of had a field trip. So the consultants came up with county and city staff, and we did a tour of 20 plus areas around the city, kind of discuss the barriers and the opportunities that are outside of the city. And so we had a good event there. They met with the steering committee after that. We just met with them today about their public input plan, their public engagement plan that they're putting together. So throughout the summer, there's going to be quite a few opportunities. They're going to be at different events throughout the community. The consultants and staff will be to collect information. We're scheduling in-person interviews with the stakeholders in that area, that growth area, and a number of other things that are going to be going on. So we'll do one round of stakeholder meetings at the beginning, and then they're going to come back after we've got some kind of a plan and do another round of stakeholder meetings, and then compile all that information from the stakeholder meetings, from the interviews, from the public meetings. There'll be a survey that they're putting together, all those things. So hopefully we can get a good gauge of where the community is and how they want to see the Laramie community grow. So we're pretty excited about that. Along these same lines, that they would like to meet and bring some information to this group, Planning and Zoning Commission. And there's kind of two options we could go. City Planning Commission meets at 4:30 on April 25th, which is a Monday. We could, or the Planning and Zoning Commission could be included in that meeting if you would like to do that. It sounds like they don't have much on their agenda. And so if you guys would like to do that in that setting where you're with the City Planning Commission and hear a presentation, we could do that at that time. That's an invitation or just, something you guys can decide. The other option would be is we would have them come on May 11th to our meeting then, if that would be more convenient, or if you'd just like to be in your kind of own realm to hear that. Either way, so I don't know if you guys have an opinion or how you'd like to go forward with that, but here within the next month, they do want to meet with you as well. So.
What was the April date, David?
It's April 25th at 4:30 on Monday. That's when their planning commission meets.
David, I'll just say, I would love to be there. I'm gonna be out there on the 25th, so for me personally, our meeting on the 11th would work better.
Honestly, I might not be there either because I'll be driving back from Idaho that day. So I'll try to be there, but
I will say that
I have a conflict as well on the 25th.
Mr. Chairman, I do as well. So thanks.
Actually, me too. So I guess we're just a total shout out there. So
Here's your name. May 11th it is. So if that's okay with you, I'll come on the agenda for May 11th.
So let's do that. Is that all right, folks? Let's put him on for the 11th. And
yeah,
May 11th. Okay, let's figure on that.
Perfect. And I don't know if they'll want to attend in person or virtual, but they'll be present in some fashion. So.
Am I correct to assume that there will come some zoning will come out of this? It sounds like at least we keep talking about growth area 1, 2, and 3. That's part and parcel of what these guys are doing. Is that correct?
Yeah. So this plan. So we're doing the plan, right? And that's going to be your policy, kind of the guidance, the big picture policy, what we want to do. One of the other things that should come out of this is an intergovernmental agreement on how we deal with growth. And so that may have some definitions of how we address these things. And obviously, yes, zoning will definitely be something that we will look at after this plan is approved, or we'll look at what they've suggested and how we can adjust our zoning and possibly our subdivision regulations as well to work within this area. So that's the plan, at least. the way I plan is I plan and then nothing happens the way I plan, so see. But
Place to start. Oh, that'll be exciting. Other questions on that? Thank you. Looking forward to it. So the cleanup of our meeting, commissioner comments. I think we've covered a lot of territory over the course of the meeting. Is there anything someone wants to bring up specifically? Hearing none. Our next meeting, 11th, I guess we just discussed that, unless someone has an objection to that. Any reason to think we won't have a quorum? Looking at faces, looks good. What do we got? So citizen comments, we're a little short on citizens. Bonnie, if you got something you'd like to tell us? Someone who's in attendance that we're not seeing on the Zoom screen. All right, then absent objections, we are adjourned. Thank you all for your patience. For the betterment of Albany County. Look forward to seeing y'all next month.
thank y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks. See you soon.